Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, your forever DM, Gary Barker, a pun master, board game collector, and podcast enthusiast who is here to talk not only about the average adventuring party podcast, but also his crush on everyone's favorite peacekeeper, Aeryn's son, from Farscape. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. There's a little rain, but that's okay. We're good. So before we dive into this crush, can you tell people where they can find you and the Average Adventuring Party podcast online?
Sure. Like I always like to say, we're just random stuff off the internet. So you can find us at averageadventuringparty.weebly.com, I believe. We're on Twitter, Instagram. Basically, if there's a place we can put Average Adventuring Party, we're there.
Cool. Well, now you started watching Farscape with your stepdad, a fellow nerd. Was this like the first show you remember bonding with him over?
No. Oh man, I would have to say probably like the Next Generation, maybe. My stepdad was like a real, old school, closed off engineer kind of guy. Didn't really say much, but whenever there was a new show, especially like the old sci-fi channel shows, whenever they would put something out, he would make sure to come grab me. That's how it was with Farscape. He was like, I've seen this thing, there's aliens and makeup and creatures and you'll love it, trust me. And I think we had just gotten off of maybe like the midpoint of the X-Files. So yeah, not the first one, but definitely one of the more memorable ones.
And has sci-fi, was that always kind of the foundation for you bonding with your stepdad?
Not just sci-fi. Whenever he and my mother got married, we had this little weird triangular closet under our staircase in the house. And he was like, I'm going to show you something. And he opened it up and it was stacked floor to ceiling, back to front with VHS tapes and that he had recorded and books that he had gotten. So really, I think it was just any kind of fantasy media, not just sci-fi.
What a cool little cavern to have.
Yeah, it was I have never ever seen a space like it, and I have no idea why it existed in that house other than he was too lazy to cover it up with something. But
he made great use of it.
Oh yeah, and that was part of my. I think he was he had a secondary agenda because he knew that if I thought there was something good in there, I would clean it out.
Oh,
which I did. But
he was like, "Gotcha." So, did he also have eyes for Aeryn's son, or was she all yours?
No, I think he was more of a Dargo guy. Aeryn's son, at the time, I don't remember her being that popular of a character. Everyone kind of had this, will they, won't they, who will John Crichton end up with kind of attitude. And I just remember from the beginning, first episode, I saw her and I was like, that's perfect. And it didn't matter what cool alien or, super badass awesome lady they added later on in the series. Aeryn was always my squeeze.
What was that instant appeal of her?
I think it was honestly the dynamic between her and John Crichton, because I think it's why I harmonize with him so much, is he's this kind of talented guy but completely helpless in the environment and just out of his element. And she comes in and has every bit of experience and just ability that he lacks in that element in that series. So I don't know. I think it was that.
So you like a caregiver. She's kind of like that, or smart. Smart person.
like smart, skilled. She's got that kind of like ancient kung fu master level of, I don't really care about your personal well-being, but I'm gonna teach you a lesson, and it might be painful.
Would you also say it's like intelligence is also like a big factor in the crush too? Because she knows a lot. You said that wisdom type thing.
I don't know if raw intelligence is the appeal there, but I think it's just her resilience. There's actually a really good arc in the series where she's like, the peacekeepers are trained to be what they are. So, get your pilots, your soldiers, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. And she's not a tech person. So when she's put in this situation where she has to, I forget what she's putting together, a shield unit or whatever, sci-fi technobabble. She goes through like all 5 stages of grief, starting with like, I can't do this. I'm not an engineer. And by the end of it, she's like, through sheer willpower, I have accomplished this thing. So I really think it's that. It's like the willingness to do whatever is necessary to, save the day or be the better person, or just like she's willing to do it all.
Hmm. I could never. I'm not that resilient. I'd be like, oh my God, no, 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 no. But you also noted that you loved her voice. Why do you think people with accents are always like, in most cases, more appealing to us?
I don't know about the act. Like, while I am attracted to accents, don't get me wrong. Um, it, there's just these little things. So, kind of stepping outside of Aeryn for a second, one of my other
Mhm.
great crushes that I honestly probably couldn't even tell you what she looks like is one of the members of the original Broadway recording of Cats. And it's just like this little like sizzle, or her voice is just kind of smoky, and it's like the great unknown for me. Like, I have no idea why it does it,
Hmm.
but it does.
Have you ever looked that person up? Or you just want to live in the fantasy? Because it might go south. I don't know.
I know for a fact I've seen it because we had a theater teacher in high school who, like, once every month showed us Cats for some reason or another. She found an excuse to put that in the video player. But I like just trying to picture her off the top of my head, no idea.
Who were some of your other like vocal crushes? Maybe ones you could match a face to.
Oh, so like, a lot of people throw around terms like, I don't know if you want to get into it or not, like bi-curious, bisexual, whatever.
Mhm.
So for me, it's not a sexual thing, but like men and women doesn't matter to me. Um, so totally can crush on a guy's voice. Doesn't I'm not limiting myself to women only, but like Michael Rooker. Um,
That is an interesting one for you to say like male and then go Michael Rooker.
uh,
Interesting.
you know, the I don't know. There's just something about him. Like, the he's got like this baseline. You can always tell it's him, but
Yeah.
he's real subtle in um, his affectation, and just something about some of his different roles. Idris Elba is another one. While
Oh.
while we're kind of on that, Tilda Swinton. I don't care, attractive, unattractive, whatever, but just there's some little something in their voice that catches me.
I totally understand that because I have crushes on like Garth Brooks' voice and like Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20. I don't physically find them like, attractive, but it's all about the voice. I get it. But when you said like a male actor, I thought you were going to go Sam Elliott because that's a good voice.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Sam Elliott is up there, and in fact, there's a character in our gaming podcast that I voiced with Sam Elliott in mind.
Oh.
But if my girlfriend had her way, Sam Elliott would be all hers. So I can't really claim that.
She would have to fight my mom, my mother-in-law. I think every woman that is my mother-in-law's age. He's like the hottie of that like generation. And I guess still It's the voice.
Oh yeah, it's the voice. In fact, that's pretty much the only reason I sat down and watched. Oh, I can't think of the name of the show now, where he's the on the cattle ranch.
Mm.
Uh,
The
but
18 something, the
I,
Yellowstone one.
no, it's a
Oh, the
no,
ranch.
yes, the ranch. Of course, it's the ranch. Something simple, I'd forget. Um, yeah, I was just walking through the house one day. My girlfriend was watching it because it had Sam Elliott in it, and I heard the voice, and I was like, "Well, I can make some time to sit down and listen to him."
Really, he's good for radio. So back to Aeryn. This character played into that like hard exterior at first, but over time she softens up. When you sort of look back at other characters from TV that you love, do they like fall into that same sort of trope?
Some do. I know there are a fair few that do. I really do like that about her because it plays into, as you find out, the way the peacekeepers raise their kids to just be born for a purpose. Very few children are born out of love, so they don't have that emotional support growing up. They don't give that emotional support as they grow older, and their relationships are just when you need to blow off steam, you go find somebody. When the ranks need to be filled, you have kids. So watching her, not only just from like a interpersonal perspective, but watching her like break the entire cultural norm, I think is the really great appeal of her whole art.
And are there any like when you think back favorite like Aeryn centric episodes or parts of her plot or arc that you really like stick out all these years later? Because the show premiered in 1999. It's been a while.
Yeah, I know. I'm old. I was in middle school when it
We
came out.
I think we're the same age.
Oh, well, then I have news for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually an episode that I love to death, and everybody's done it. Like, I brought up the Next Generation earlier. Picard had an episode where he did exactly the same thing. I know. South Park did it. Simpsons did it. I don't care. But her and John get to a planet where they can't leave, and all of the power is gone out of all their futuristic technology. So they're forced to live. And at first the episode kind of starts with this, oh, how are we going to get off the planet sort of arc. And by the time it's over, they've given up and they've conceded to living a life together, and decades pass, and the whole time it's just her and John Crichton being snippety old people at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it because I saw my grandparents' relationship. Like I could have sworn I was watching them on TV. And there was like that love there.
Mm-hmm.
But they were the type of people who wouldn't show it in public, and very rarely showed it in like flowery, overly emotional ways, but you could tell just from looking at them. And that's the vibe I got from them.
Well, how many times have you watched the series? Like I love there's certain shows I love, but I'm not that great at like remembering them all. So how many times have you watched Farscape?
Let's see. Probably there's episodes that I've picked up out of context, but start to finish, I've maybe watched it 4 or 5 times, including the original run.
Oh, wow. That's not like that much considering like binging now. I think I'm on like double digits with The Office and Frasier, so you have a way better memory than I do.
Well, it's not like my girlfriend's favorite TV show of all time is Firefly, and that's what like 14 episodes. So when she wants to sit down and watch it, that's a day. Easy. There's like 6 seasons and movies, and it's difficult for me to sit down and commit that much time to a single thing.
Understandable. So while some of us eventually abandon our middle school crushes, Aeryn's son is still someone you love. And you mentioned before we started chatting today that even the actress that plays her, you love her, Claudia Black. When she was in Pitch Black, you almost walked out because, spoiler, even though the movie is over 20 years old, she dies at the beginning. So when did the crush on the character start to just become a crush on the actor? Because I've said it before, I think there is a difference between a character and an actor. Like I love Michael C. Hall. I always use this as a example. I love Dexter, but I don't care about Michael C. Hall. So when did like you start to be like, well, I like everything about this character, even the woman that plays her?
See, that's a hard line for me. I don't know. I don't know where that blurring came in. I just remember one day, especially with Riddick, they were like, "Oh, there's this movie. It's got aliens," which it's kind of an easy sell for me. And they're like, "It's got this guy that's pretty much unknown, this other guy that's pretty much unknown, and this and that." And they're like, "Oh, and also on the cover is Claudia Black." And I think that was the first movie where I was like, she's got selling power for me. Like, if you put her in something, I honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I think she was the reason why I bought into Dragon Age as much as I did, because she's on the cover of that.
That's understood. There's some people like that where we're like, well, they're in it. Now I will watch it and I'll be a fan of it. That's me and Jesse Eisenberg for the most part. But did you follow Claudia to other shows over the years? Like she was in Stargate, The Originals, an animated series called Final Space. She really likes to stay in the space realm, I noticed.
I mean, if you're good at something,
Yeah.
keep with it. Yeah, I did follow her over. Stargate's another show that I watched with my stepdad, and I always forget she's in it. I recently rewatched it, and when I got to that episode, I was like, oh, hey, now I remember. But yeah, I've followed her to other things. Especially, she's one of those actors. She's like Mark Hamill. She does acting, but I think is more well known at this point for her voice acting chops. So if a new game comes out, and to me, she's got just a perfectly distinct voice that I can pick out in the lineup. So when a trailer comes on TV or I get an ad on YouTube, I was about to say commercial. Nobody knows what commercials are anymore. Whenever I'm doing that and I'm typing away on one screen and I hear that voice, like that's an immediate, oh, I need to check that thing out.
Your ears perk up. You have like a Claudia Black like satellite.
I mean, it is for her, and I've got several people like everyone uses it, but Bill Murray, like he has a super distinct voice. That's kind of how I identify a lot of people. Is I can tell you what they look like, but I can tell you what they sound like a lot more accurately.
Interesting. And do you like that Claudia Black has sort of stayed within this kind of nerdy sci-fi realm of entertainment for you? Seems like that's your bread and butter.
I do, because I think she was one of the first ones that really owned it, right? So like leading up from the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the actors that were in sci-fi and horror and things like that, that was kind of an embarrassment to them. Leslie Nielsen's a good one. Everyone forgets that he used to be in all these cheesy sci-fi movies before he was, who he was, with all his comedies. And, like leading into the 80s, you had people who starred in horror. And then, going into the 90s, they were like, oh, no, I didn't do that. You didn't see that. McConaughey and Zellweger are a good example of that. With the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they did it when they were kids, got famous, and then looking back, they were like, we'll do anything whatsoever to get that out of the public conscious. But Claudia Black, she was one of the first ones who was like, yeah, I did a thing. I'm proud of that thing. Let me put it front and center. And it makes me so happy now that not just her, but like other, a celebrity can be in Guardians of the Galaxy, which 20 years ago would have been a career death note. And now they're able to put that stuff front and center. So I love the fact that she found her niche. She's happy enough and satisfied enough with her work to keep doing it, which, as long as she's fulfilled, she's going to keep doing it, which means I get more entertainment. It's kind of a selfish way to look at it, but it is what it is.
It's a win-win situation. Now, since you're a fan and collector of board games, I'd love to know which one you'd bust out if you could host a game night with Aeryn's son.
Oh, see, that's tough, because she's a how would I put this politely, a literal thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some wonky board games on my shelves, because the way I am with voices for people, I am with themes for board games. So if someone's like, here's this weird game about, I don't know, rats stealing space planes, like, that sounds perfect, even if it's a terrible game. um, I would probably break out, actually, can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a board game, we just call it Among Us the board game.
Oh, okay.
And that's what it is everyone trying to suss out who amongst them is the one who sabotaged the ship,
Mm-hmm.
while the ship itself continues to sabotage itself. So I feel like that's enough into her realm where she could read the people and the aliens in there. Uh,
That sounds perfect for somebody on Farscape. But would you switch it up if it was like not Aeryn, it was Claudia Black? What game are we playing with the real person?
so Claudia Black is Australian, I believe. It's Australian or New Zealand. I can't quite remember. Uh, but I have a game that, again, the theme snagged me. It's called Waste Nights. It's basically Mad Max, takes place in the Australian outback. And I feel, just getting her to the table, that would be like the perfect thing. Sit down, open the box, and the first thing she sees is this weird sci-fi wasteland Australia.
Well, you have a game for everyone. I feel like you can match everyone's personality to a game. Interesting. What a skill. I love board games as well. I'm really sad. When I moved from California to here, my husband's family doesn't love board games or game nights as much as mine. So I'm really excited to go back to California in July and have a game night with my family. But we have reached the portion of the interview where we sort of do our own role playing. You're going to imagine your life with Aeryn's son and let us know, what does a life with her entail?
Oof. Structure. I think more than anything, she's used to that chain of command. So I'm kind of a free form person. I like making plans and all, but more than that, I just go along to get along and see what happens. I think she would impose a great deal of structure on my life. Be the type of life where you have that 4-foot calendar by the front door with all the dates on it.
The whiteboard.
Yeah, right now, like, I have no idea what's happening at any given time, but I think with her, I would know the next couple of years.
She'd be like those moms that are just super organized, like PTA meetings, everyth's color coordinated, like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, just with more guns.
More guns. Well, you got to have a color on the whiteboard for that as well. So we talked about the crush. Now let's talk more about what you have going on. First off, when did you initially get into RPGs and tabletop games?
Oh, let's see. I tell this story. It's one of my earliest memories, but and it really dates me. But back in the day, TSR, the company that would become Wizards and be bought by Hasbro and eventually put out Dungeons and Dragons, used to put out these VCR adventure games that were like Dungeons and Dragons Light. So you'd put in the videotape in the VCR, and it would start telling the story, and then it would go, okay, pause. Now you need to roll your dice and move your people and do this thing. And then if you did a thing, it would, go to 1 minute and 50 seconds to see how this encounter played out. So it's that kind of thing. And I was probably like 5 when my uncle bought a bunch of these somehow. And he used to just make us play, make like all the grandkids play, just so he could kill our characters. Got some like weird perverse energy out of it. So that's like my first technical D&D experience. But when I was a little bit older, a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, was visiting and saw me and was like, aha, you have long hair and a neck beard. You'd be perfect for Dungeons and Dragons. So then, I got in with him, and the rest was history.
All right. These VCR games sound like pretty like I'm gonna say like innovative for the early 90s. I'm gonna say it was. We're about the same age, so probably that. That's crazy. I never heard of these.
Yeah, I swear for like a solid 5 years at the beginning of the 90s, every other board game you bought came with a VHS tape so you could have that mixed media.
My family was not getting those. We just had the regular Monopoly, all that stuff, Old Maid. We're big card game players. So you don't do this podcast alone. You have four wonderful people by your side. How did you, Mike, Ray, Steve, and Stephanie initially come together?
I started dating Ray through a series of weird internet meetups. Like it turned out she was meeting some friends of mine who were my roommates through, I don't remember, like meetup.com or something for board games.
Oh.
And I had contacted her. It's a whole thing, and I'm sure she would love to regale everybody with the story. But through her, I ended up moving to the town that I currently live in. And this is also going to date me. When I moved here, the very first person I met was the manager of the Hastings. And I miss Hastings with all my heart. But that was Mike. And he is as big of a nerd as I am. He and his wife both. So, we had known each other for years and years. And then a couple years after that, I had met Steve, who was a coworker of mine. And so we kind of started playing these games, just different settings and throwing together. And at one point, Steve surprised me because he was like, I've been telling my wife all the stories of our games and all the characters and everything, and she loves it. She wants to play. And so he dragged Steph into it. And we've pretty much been inseparable since.
Oh. And when did the conversation start about let's do a podcast on top of our game nights and everything?
So I guess about two and a half years ago, we were running through something or other, and I had made mention of the fact that I wanted to start recording our games for my notes, because I keep track of everything in like a OneNote. And everyone kind of reluctantly was like, yeah, sure, I guess. And I forget what we recorded, but we put it together. I was listening to it. I sent Steve some samples of it, and he was like, that sounds like something I would like to listen to. And then I want to say within like 2 weeks, we had all come to the agreement that we would start doing a podcast.
And you kicked that off about October 2021. And admittedly, you guys say you knew nothing about podcasting when you started. But what have you like personally learned so far that you feel particularly proud of?
Yeah. So when we started, like I started listening to podcasts on my very first Generation 1 iPhone in like 2008, 9, whenever that came out. So I'd listened to podcasts for years, but I had no idea what went into making one. And one of the things that I found I was truly lacking was the mixing and technical audio side of recording. So I'm really proud of the fact that I have picked that up. It's my absolute least favorite part of the process, especially when some of our episodes hit like 2 hours long. But fortunately, Steve, he's got like 19 degrees in music, I think, at this point. And
wow.
he's a sound engineer and a musician. And so he does all of his own recording. So whenever I hit a hurdle, I can just be like, hey, asking for a friend, but how do you do this? And he's able to walk me through it. So yeah, I'm really proud of the fact that I picked up a new skill that I can, take other places.
Like, just call him up. So like my show, it's just me start to finish, with the exception of my husband, who will do like the graphics, because Photoshop hurts my brain and I cannot comprehend why if I move something it goes all crazy like an old school Microsoft Word document. But it's another story for another day. But for you, other than Steve and his like engineering prowess. What does everyone else kind of bring to the table?
So Steve is he aside from all the other hats he wears, like if I had to paint him into a role, he's my sound guy. Um, he basically, if I go, hey, do you have this weird piece of hardware, I can guarantee he has it or knows a place he can get it. Stephanie, if I had to again paint her into a role, she's my artist. You can find, especially of characters from our games, you can find her art on like Twitter, on Coffee, Deviant Art, all those kind of places. And it's always the highlight of any game when she comes up and is like, oh, hey, by the way, I have made this thing. Like a couple of years ago, we went through all these NPCs, and just one day she was like, oh, by the way, based on your descriptions, I have made these comparative height charts that include all of those people. So, from the tiniest little halfling all the way up to the giant dragon folk, she had drawn 20 people. So I love getting all of that. Mike is my ideas guy. Like I'm pretty good at marketing, but I can give Mike just a scenario and be like, hey, here's whatever. What do you think we should do with it? And he just one right after the other will just spit ideas. And don't ever tell him I said so, but most of them are pretty damn good.
We won't let him know.
Yeah, I won't let him. I can't let any of these guys know I appreciate them. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray, she likewise wears many hats, but she is my sounding board, especially in games that she's not playing in. If I'm having to run like an emergency session or we're doing off season, I can just come to her with ideas and just be like, here's the stuff. And she reads more than me by a country mile. And she's quick to tell me like, oh, so-and-so did that first and better. And here's how they did it. So she is excellent for feedback.
And when you guys came together for the podcast, did you already know what you wanted to do? Or are you guys like, maybe we should do something a little different, tweak it? Or was it like, no, this is the idea, we're sticking to it?
So, funny story. I knew what I wanted to do. And then all of my gamers took a look at that and went, that's great. I'm glad you have an opinion. But remember this other thing that we did a couple of years ago that wasn't on a podcast? We should go back to that and do it again. But remember all the mistakes we made? You should give us a chance to fix those. And so through begging and pleading on their part, they convinced me to do the current game that we're doing and give them a chance to go back in time and fix all the mistakes they made in a previous game.
Also, doing these games like as a podcast, especially you started in 2021, but you're friends before that. But I feel like a lot of podcasts started because we just wanted that connection that we just weren't getting regularly, with lockdowns and everything. So did the podcast kind of help with that, like help keep you socially together?
Oh, yeah. It was one of the few like in-person activities that we maintained throughout most of the quarantine. Like we were quarantined, especially at the beginning when everybody was unsure what was going on. But once the vaccines, kicked in and everyone kind of figured out what was what, we know where everybody was and what they were doing and whether they were going in or out and whether they were vaccinated. So being able to, see them in person, I think kept me sane, because as much as I do online, I am really an in-person kind of guy. I'm like the only extrovert in a sea of introverts.
Oh, so your 4 partners are like the introverts?
What is that? They have the extrovert battery, and it runs down at various levels on them.
Understandable.
But I'm pretty much in person all the time. I love people, and I even here on the computer, I'm sitting here like talking with my hands and making faces, and yeah, being with them over that, I think really helped keep me centered more than anything.
Especially if you are a people person. That was, I think, introverts kind of low-key celebrated inside that we didn't have to leave. But can you tell listeners what's going on the Average Adventuring Party podcast right now and what they can expect as the summer continues to roll on?
Uh, hmm. Well, see, that's a tough one because we're sort of in a timeline within a timeline within a timeline. Let's just say I started the game off by destroying the entirety of existence, except for, these four guys, and sent them back in time to fix the mistakes that they had made so that this hopefully won't happen again. There's this old saying about things the dungeon master should and shouldn't do, and the player should and shouldn't do, which is split the party. At the end of season 2, I managed to split the party not 1, 2, or 3, but 4 ways. And each of the main characters has had their own season 3 campaign, which we're about to wrap up. And then starting at the end of summer, we'll go into our off season. I'm not sure if Mike or Steve will run a game or if I'll run a game, but it'll be something different and interesting. Last off season, we had superheroes. I think Warhammer has been bandied about. I'm not sure. So we're still trying to nail that down.
You seem like a chaotic dungeon master then. You're following the rules. Where do you that's what does it, I get confused about these games. Like, where do you come up with the ideas when you're building it out, and how long does it take you? Because it seems so labor intensive.
So for this particular setting, in my head, so the first time we ran it years ago, Ray told me that she wanted to play, and it had been 20 years since she played D&D. So she wanted something very basic. So I thought to myself, let me do something about dragons. And I kind of softballed a few ideas over to the group, and we got to talking, and that became something else, which became something else, and so on down the line. I get a lot of inspiration from my party, actually, which is kind of weird, and a lot of dungeon masters find it anathema, but if you listen, your players will tell you what they want to play, and that's how it's been. That's how it's been with these guys. Is I'll kind of feel like, I want to do X, and they'll go, yes, but, and then that starts a whole conversation, which gives me inspiration. As far as how much time I spend on it, it really depends, but I think the metric I've worked out, and including like me idly daydreaming during the day when I'm supposed to be working, it's like an hour and a half to every hour that we play.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
It is, but I'll be doing that, and I'll just have like OneNote or my actual physical notebook open. As I think of things throughout the day, I'll write it down, and then later that night, as I'm transcribing, I'm able to put however much time I want into it.
And you mentioned Stephanie's an artist, Steve's doing the music. Are all of you sort of creative in that regard? Feels like you would have to be super creative to do D&D or these type of games.
I don't think you have to be. Like, I think you just have to enjoy storytelling. People that have told me they love Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPGs in general, a fair few of them are just like, I don't want anything to do with the creative process. I can envision these things in my head. It's just like watching a movie or playing a video game. Like, it's a media I can consume. So I kind of feel like that's what would you say, like a beginner's fallacy? Like, people don't get into it because they think they have to be creative. But my particular group is Steve's got his music, Steph with her art, Ray is actually a published poet, and Mike is like me, he's a writer, and I think some of his best stuff he's shown me and then like hidden away. So I don't think he's ever published anything, but he's like me, he loves storytelling.
I was gonna say, it feels like this is a good kind of hobby for writers to do. You have to get really into that space. I'm a writer as well. Maybe I'll jump into D&D. I always thought it'd be kind of fun. Me and my husband, we got one of those choose your own adventure games that Target made, and that was pretty fun. So maybe.
The only downside to it is you have to kind of, especially if you're a habitual writer of a particular kind, you have to kind of forget that it's like writing in a new format. Like you can't write a blog and write a play and write a movie and write a book using the same techniques. So it's one of those where a lot of people are like, oh, I am a writer, and they jump into it and are completely overwhelmed because it's, you said chaotic earlier.
Yeah.
That's a pretty apt description.
So, of course, I gotta ask because it's probably the most popular thing regarding Dungeons and Dragons, at least right now, and that is Stranger Things. Is that a show you consume, or do you think they get something? Maybe do they get it wrong? Do they get it right? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 seasons of Stranger Things. I think it has what I call supernatural syndrome, which is where it reached a great stopping point, and then they went, well, the money's too big to stop here, and so they just kept going and kept going. So I haven't seen the last season. I really don't plan to, but yeah, I really like what they've done there, because you talk about the writing process for D&D being kind of chaotic and weird. They had the same problem. Like, they started out as basically wanting to write Carrie or Firestarter, and when they asked Stephen King, he said no. So they went, great, let's do our own thing then. So yeah, I think it's an absolutely wonderful piece of media to a point.
They just should have. Well, what sucks is they take so long too, and they like, guys, Will looks 40 now. Come on.
Yeah, that's a big part of it is, your adult cast, they're kind of set. You can do whatever you want. And if you need to take a 3-year hiatus, you can. But with a kid-centric show like that, you can't take those kind of breaks. And I think that's part of it, the casting. But yeah, no spoilers. They just should have stopped while they were ahead.
Yeah, it is weird. I think growing up in the 90s too, we had like shows like TGIF shows where the kids just grew up gradually. So I think that's a little shocking to the system to find a new season, and 11's now, looks 20, and you're like, but why is she in 10th grade? That makes no sense. DJ Tanner looked 15 because she was 15, I don't know.
Well, you can't cast someone who's not 25 to play a high schooler now.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking Luke Perry on 90210, but he was so pretty.
That's the example I was going to bring up. all these clearly adults who are 16 and 17.
I know, like, Dylan, come on now. You're not fooling anybody. And I mean, that one girl, the girl with the glasses on 90210, she really was a lot older than them on the show, like in real life. Like, I think she had 10 years on him in real life.
The one I always pick out from that show is what's his name, Brian Austin Green, because a couple of years later he was in the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and he looked younger there than he did in 90210. So I spoke fun at him.
But so that's well, that's the end of my questions for you. But I'm gonna ask if you can remind people where they can find you and the show online.
Yeah, you can find us at averageadventuringparty.weebly.com. You can find us on Linktree, I think. It's Linktree/AAP. You should go there and totally sponsor an F-bomb. Or iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all those fun places.
Well, Gary, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today about your TV character crush. And everyone, you can find all that information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.